This build is all about channeling your inner Electro and using the Tree Spear and Faith Incantations to destroy your enemy. Don't worry, I won't spear any details. Hey, this video is sponsored by no one. Do all that good YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, etc, etc. Let me know what other builds you would like to see for Elden Ring. Now let's go. So firstly, for character creation, this build is using either the Confessor or the Prophet classes. If you want to know more about the initial setup and how to build these classes in the early stages, you can check out my class guides, which will be linked here. How to play this build is essentially, the way that this works is we're going to be two-handing the Tree Spear, which is a Dex and Faith scaling spear, and we'll be using the occasional incantations in our offhand to either buff the spear or just deal damage from range. And the Tree Spear does holy and physical damage and has great range on its own, where you can poke enemies from distance and then lunge forward with a heavy attack if you do want to. And the jump attack is also really strong for closing that distance and quickly deal with enemies. If you're, say, in the mid-range casting spells and then you want to close that distance, you can jump in and finish them off. And that's why I like this spear with this build, because you're going to be keeping your distance from enemies a little bit while you are using these incantations, and just being able to poke them a little bit with the spear and keep that distance because of the reach you have with the spear. It just kind of fits well with this build. And we're going with an electric theme here, so we're using a lot of the electric lightning spells, but you could use many of the incantations like the Black Flame or the Blood Blade or whatever suits you, but the lightning damage and buffing lightning damage is what we're kind of focusing on and dealing that kind of damage to enemies. And lightning damage is really effective against heavily armored enemies, and most enemies have standard resistances to lightning, so you can damage them well enough with this kind of damage type. And we're using the Electrify armament to increase the lightning damage of our weapon, and because it's already doing physical and holy, we can then buff it again and do lightning damage as well and deal those three types of damages to enemies. And we're also using the Lightning Spear and Lightning Strike, which are very valuable lightning based faiths incantations that you can use from a little bit of range to deal more of that damage and keep in that mid range before closing the distance to finish things off with the spear. And you can also put a shield in your offhand if you do want to be a little bit more defensive and just focus on the Tree Spear. You could then use the Electrify armament to buff your spear with lightning damage and then switch to a shield, so you've got that protection while still using some of their faith incantations to have the benefit to you there. Let's talk about the spells for this build. And one thing that you can really stick with throughout most of your playthrough is Flame Sling. It's a cheap and easy to use fire spell that we're still going to use even in this build because of how valuable it is just to deal some of that fire damage to enemies. But the main spells that you will use outside of that is Lightning Spear, which hurls a lightning spear, makes sense, that's in the title, at the enemy. And I really want to test this in PvP because I feel like this is going to be a really strong PvP spell because of how slow, or the trigger, it takes a little bit of time to actually hit, and because of that timing, it's going to be hard for people to time their dodges and rolls. So it's something that if you have tried this in PvP, do let me know in the comments down below. The Lightning Strike we're also using, and this summons a lightning bolt that spreads on impact, so you can hit multiple enemies with this and just deal lightning damage to the target, as well as the Electrifying armament, which we already mentioned, allows you to enchant your Tree Spear to deal lightning damage on top of that. The Tree Spear can't be changed in terms of its Ash of War. It comes with Sacred Order, which adds Holy Essence to the weapon, which increases its damage to undead. It says it's highly effective against those who live in death, and that's basically undead, and it increases some of that damage, but for the most part, we won't be using this Ash of War. You may use it in some certain situations, but for the most part, you can ignore it. Your flasks are mostly going to be in health, with maybe 2 to 3 in FP, depending on how many flasks you actually have, but for the most part, you're going to want a lot of health because you will be taking damage and you want to be able to heal that back, and we can survive without having focus, whereas we can't survive without having health in this build. If you got attributes, your main attributes are going to be Faith and Dexterity. We're using Dexterity here because the Tree Spear stacks with Dexterity primarily, as well as Faith, so there are two stats primarily. You will want some Strength here, and you can play around with increasing your Strength using some of the other Faith-based weapons that are Strength as well, but for the most part, Dex and Strength are our two key here, as well as minor additions into Endurance and Vigor. We're always going to need Vigor for health and Endurance because we are using a melee weapon. You're going to want to have some stamina just to be able to back you up in some of those scenarios. For your gear, the Tree Spear is our main weapon, and it's obtained just inside the Lernia of the Lakes. In the back of a caravan here, there is a big troll in the way, so just be careful of that, but you can get the Tree Spear from this location. We are using the Crimson Dagger Talisman to get HP back when you do perform staggers on enemies and allow yourself to do critical hits or backstabs. This is just valuable to give you more health so you don't have to waste a flask. I like using this in a lot of builds, and you can get this from the Death Touched Catacombs from the Assassin at the end of that area. The Erdtree's Favor is a fantastic talisman, especially for this build. It increases your HP, your stamina, and your equip load, so you can wear heavier armor, you have a little bit more HP and stamina. You can find this talisman in the Fringe Folk Hero's Grace, which is found by using a Stoneswood key at the Stranded Graveyard near the very start of the game. There's a secret little drop here where you can find this Erd Tree's favor. The Claw talisman also enhances your jump attacks if you want to focus on those jump attacks and closing the distance. You can find this in Stormvale Castle, so if you're using the jump attack a lot with this weapon after using some of those spells and incantations to deal damage from range and then you're closing that distance, you can equip the Claw talisman to enhance those jump attacks just to give you a little bit more damage. The Lightning Spear Faith incantation comes from the Dragon Cult prayer book, which the Golden Knight near the Artist Shack drops, so you can kill him and he'll drop this. Be careful though, because he does actually use this on you as well. You also get the Electrify Amulet from this prayer book as well. The Lightning Strike is obtained from the Weeping Peninsula. There is a scarab here that you can get Lightning Strike from. For your armor in general, I'm a firm believer in just wearing whatever suits the situation that you're in, but having something that has high physical resistance is important for this build because we are going to primarily be in melee range. The Knight set at the round table is cheap and it does have decent resistances. You could wear the Carrion set, which you can get in Raya Lucaria as well, or just any old pieces that you find. You can mismatch them all together and just whatever fits, and as long as you're not heavy rolling, you're staying in that medium load range, you'll be fine with whatever you're equipping. Some quick tips for this build, and obviously jump attacks to close the distance, but as mentioned earlier about using a shield, don't be afraid to pull out the shield for the defensive weapons, but because this is a piercing weapon, you can actually keep the shield up, so you can hold the shield active while stabbing as well at the same time, so you can still block attacks while doing like little pokes as part of that. So there's a good sort of synergy between the shield and the tree spear here if you're going that route. If you want to try some other weapons, the Winged Scythe is a great weapon alternative for this build if you don't like the tree spear and its attack combinations. It has similar stat requirements, but it scales with faith, dex, and strength, same as the tree spear, and it has a better Ash of War on it with the angel wings as well. So it's an alternative that you could play with this build, but this is what we're going with, is the tree spear, and I might actually make a build on the Winged Scythe because I really do like the way it looks. Maybe come kind of Dark Reaper build using this scythe. I like the idea of doing something like that. If you like dexterity, I have plenty of dexterity builds on the channel. We're just going to start moving into strength now, so keep an eye on the channel for that. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.